Trey, final game that we will do a deep dive into here tonight, our third featured game of the week. Number 23, Auburn on the road at number 7, Oklahoma. The Sooners are 6.5-point favorites. Again, for those watching this YouTube clip, those rankings are our all podcasters poll that we've created separately with a bunch of other shows. 2:30 p.m. on ABC. Set the stage for me here, Trey. Obviously, Jackson Arnold is coming back to town. Auburn's starting to feel themselves a little bit. They've had some success on the ground. They beat Baylor early on. They're relatively healthy. The roster looks good. But Oklahoma has passed every task with flying colors so far, and I know they're excited to open up SEC play as well.
Yeah, the obvious storyline is the revenge narrative, right? With Jackson Arnold, that's the low hanging fruit here, and it's a big part of the story because everything that he went through last year, getting benched when stuff was obviously not his fault. The offensive line was terrible, the receivers were hurt, but getting benched in the spot that he did by the Oklahoma coaching staff, going and facing that same Oklahoma coaching staff that decided they would rather have a kid from Washington State than him. That's going to play a big part in this. You know that he is fired up and wants to beat Oklahoma, maybe even more than it might be sacrilegious for Auburn fans to hear this, but I think your quarterback wants to beat Oklahoma maybe even more than Alabama or Georgia this year. And when he looks up and down the schedule, I don't know how Auburn fans would feel about that, but I think that if you gave Jackson Arnold truth serum, he'd probably tell you that. So big part of the story, but I think what will actually define this story is the offensive lines, because we've seen, for as good as Oklahoma has looked at times, we've seen their offensive line really struggle in spots, and they played some good defensive lines. Michigan has some dudes up there. Temple even, I was kind of impressed with some of the just bodies that they had. Now, Oklahoma did a great job of moving those bodies out of the way
Yes,
last weekend, but just on paper, it's they have some nice pieces on that Temple defensive line, some decently talented players, but Oklahoma as a whole, that's the biggest question mark left for them for me. Do they have enough consistently on the offensive line to keep John Mateer off his back so he's not getting hurt, and their whole offensive game plan is just thrown out the window, because we know what happens when you're trying to build the whole offense out of your quarterback and don't have a backup plan. Ask South Carolina how that works when that quarterback gets hurt. It doesn't look good, and it won't look good for Oklahoma if Mateer's not able. So the offensive line on Oklahoma, on the other side, can Auburn contain Oklahoma's defensive line? Because Auburn's offensive line has looked pretty good against some of the weaker competition that they faced. We saw Auburn just have their way with Baylor's defensive front on the road in Waco on opening night. But this is going to be a completely different animal, facing an Oklahoma defensive line that was disruptive, that made Bryce Underwood extremely uncomfortable for the vast majority of that game. Can Auburn get the running lanes? They're not going to get it as often as they did against Baylor, where they could just run Jackson Arnold up the middle and have great success doing that over and over. Can they get that consistently enough to then open up that passing game, let those receivers cook? Whoever's offensive line steps up to the task a little bit more, I think, is going to be ultimately who wins this football game.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's defense has passed all the questions or concerns that I had early, right? In that game against Michigan, where they were able to be physical, they were able to stop anything that Michigan did consistently on offense, other than one big run, right, to Justice Haynes. But I felt like Oklahoma got back to their meat and potatoes of just dominating the trenches, locking your skill position players down, and keeping any progress offensively to a minimum. They're going to have to do that exact same thing against Auburn, because the biggest question to me in this game is, which Jackson Arnold do we get? Do we get a Jackson Arnold that we've seen in high school and maybe some flashes in college, where he's great throwing the football down the field, throwing lasers into tight windows, throwing receivers open? Or do we get the Jackson Arnold that in the biggest moments for Oklahoma didn't know how to process the game at that speed, didn't understand what the defense was throwing at him, checked into mistakes, checked into turnovers, and it was just, a comedy of errors, and ultimately lost his job for it. Now, we've seen Arnold be very, very good with his legs so far this year. And you look at the Baylor game, they haven't really played anybody since. They played South Alabama last Saturday. Didn't really pull away from the Jags. They had some really nice moments, but other than that, I don't know that it was a performance that personally alleviated all the concerns and says, okay, Jackson Arnold has turned the chapter. We have reached, Arnold 2.0. And that's what I think he's going to have to hit against the Oklahoma Sooners for them to win this game. When I think about the blowout potential, which is something that I try and do for every single one of these games when we're picking against the spread, I think it clearly rests with Oklahoma. Nothing that I've seen from Oklahoma's defense or Auburn's offense leads me to believe that Auburn will just start throwing the football for 400 yards, getting the ball in the hands of Eric Singleton or Cam Coleman, and beating the Sooners by 21 plus. But I do think that Oklahoma, with John Mateer, if he's special, if he's throwing the ball to Deion Burks, if Torrey Blaylock is having a big game, they need to find that established running back beside Mateer. But if they can get all of that going, we've seen Auburn kind of implode on itself like a dying star. Not predicting that Auburn does that here tonight, but this line feels like it's begging you to take Auburn, the new look Auburn, the newly revamped War Eagle defense, the passing game on the road in a tough spot against the Sooners. And I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take Oklahoma minus the 6.5.
I'm taking Oklahoma as well. I think you mentioned Jackson Arnold. He's going to have to throw the ball for probably over 250 to win the game. I think that's just like the baseline starting point. I would be absolutely shocked if he threw for less than 250 yards and they still found a way to win the game. 250 is about where you can start talking me into the path to victory for them.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, I will say I don't think Oklahoma wins this game just on the legs of John Mateer. You mentioned
Sure.
Blaylock had a fantastic game. That's a really promising true freshman that kind of broke out against Temple last week, had 100 yards and a couple touchdowns. He looked really good. We need to see that again against a step up in competition. They've got to find someone to supplement John Mateer's legs and give him a spell, honestly, so that he's not taking as many body blows throughout the entire season. But yeah, I'm with Oklahoma. They feel like the more proven commodity right now, so I'm going to take them to cover the 6.5 point spread. And I'm just a little concerned about who Auburn is at this point. I need more data points on Auburn before I'm excited to back them, especially on the road at night. I think this is a night game, or is this a 2:30 game?
2:30 p.m.
2:30, yeah. So on the road, at least in the SEC, need a few more data points before I'm excited to back them in this spot.
I'll say this, though, in closing, like if Auburn does find a way to beat Oklahoma, not only is the revenge story a massive narrative, but with 3 offensive coordinators and all the hijinks and drama that is swirled around Auburn, the concern with Hugh Freeze's golf game, is his handicap in a better place than Auburn's offense is? If the Tigers are able to win this game, the SEC feels so incredibly wide open that then you could start, I think, to have a conversation with me about here's how Auburn goes 9-3, 10-2, starts to find their way back into the equation atop the SEC. Because if we've seen anything this year, it's the top of the conference probably has more questions than answers, and the mid-pack looks like it's going to tear you alive. I mean, the SEC champion might have 2 losses unless it's, Georgia, who just runs the table. But this conference is looking like it is going to brutalize itself once again, but probably in the most impressive manner possible. Not where we're just getting upset sprung left, right, and center, but where home field advantage really matters. And that, 15th, 17th ranked team at home is favored in a lot of lines, maybe over a team that's higher ranked, but having to go into hostile territory.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the home road splits for Auburn later this year, where I believe this is a year where they get both Alabama and Georgia at home, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yep.
Yeah, I mean, they could be right in the middle of that picture as well, even as a lower 20s or slightly unranked team, even if they drop a couple early road games. So they're definitely not out of the picture. They're not out of deciding the championship picture in the SEC, even if they do lose this game.